Hey, welcome back. Tonight, we are talking about pistols. Not in a violent way, not in a way that is meant to excite or disturb. Just slowly, quietly, the way you might talk about any remarkable human invention. With curiosity, with respect for the history, with an appreciation for how much of the world we live in was shaped by this one object, and the centuries of ingenuity that went into making it what it is today. There are 100 facts waiting for you tonight. Each one a small window into the world of the pistol, its history, its mechanics, the people who made it, the moments that changed because of it, the quiet details that most people never get around to learning. You don't need to remember any of this. You don't need to stay awake for it. Just let it wash over you slowly, one fact at a time, like water finding its level in a still and quiet place. Sit down and relax. The room is dark, and we are going to begin. Fact number 1. The word pistol is believed to come from the city of Pistoia in Italy. Pistoia was a city in Tuscany, known during the 15th and 16th centuries for its metalworking and its craftsmen. The small handheld firearms produced there were so associated with the city that the place itself became the name for the thing. Other historians trace the word to the Czech word for pipe, pistola, referring to the barrel of the early firearm. The exact origin is still debated, but either way, the word carries centuries of history inside it. A single syllable that contains an entire world of craft and conflict and change. Fact number 2. The first handheld firearms appeared in China in the 13th century. Long before the pistol as we know it existed, Chinese inventors were experimenting with small handheld devices that used gunpowder to propel projectiles. These early fire lances and hand cannons were crude by any modern standard. Heavy, slow to load, unreliable in wet weather, and as dangerous to the person holding them as to anyone standing in front of them. But they were the beginning. The first hesitant steps toward the idea that a person could carry a weapon powered by controlled explosion, rather than by muscle and string. Fact number 3. Early pistols were called hand cannons and had to be lit by hand. The operator would pour gunpowder into the barrel, pack a projectile on top of it, and then apply a lit match or a glowing coal to a small hole in the side of the barrel called the touch hole. The powder would ignite, the explosion would drive the projectile forward, and the operator would immediately begin the long process of reloading. A skilled operator could fire perhaps 1 shot per minute. In the chaos of a battle, with shaking hands and the sounds of everything happening around them, the process took considerably longer. The pistol of that era required as much nerve as skill. Fact number 4. The matchlock mechanism was one of the first major advances in pistol design. Rather than requiring the operator to manually apply a burning match to the touch hole, the matchlock mechanism used a clamp that held a slow-burning match cord. When the trigger was pulled, the clamp swung the burning match down into a small pan of priming powder, which ignited and set off the main charge. It sounds simple described this way, but it was a genuine innovation. It freed one of the operator's hands. It made firing more reliable and more controlled, and it began the long process of turning the pistol from a clumsy experiment into something approaching a practical weapon. Fact number 5. The wheel lock mechanism made pistols truly portable for the first time. Invented in the early 16th century, the wheel lock used a spinning steel wheel, wound like a clock spring, to create sparks when the trigger was pulled. Unlike the matchlock, it did not require a burning match to be kept lit and ready. A wheel lock pistol could be loaded and carried safely, then fired when needed without any preparation. This changed everything. A rider on horseback could carry a loaded wheel-lock pistol under a cloak and draw and fire it without warning. The pistol became, for the first time, a weapon of surprise, a weapon of concealment, a weapon that could be ready before anyone knew it was there. Fact number 6. The flintlock mechanism dominated pistol design for nearly 2 centuries. Developed in the early 17th century, the flintlock replaced the wheel lock with a simpler and more reliable system. A piece of flint held in a spring-loaded clamp would strike a steel plate when the trigger was pulled, creating sparks that ignited the priming powder. Flintlock pistols were used by soldiers, sailors, duelists, highwaymen, and civilians across Europe and the Americas from roughly 1630 to 1840. 200 years of the same basic mechanism, refined and perfected by generations of gunsmiths. The flintlock was not replaced because it stopped working. It was replaced because something better finally arrived. Fact number 7. The percussion cap changed pistol history forever. Invented in the early 19th century, the percussion cap replaced the flintlock spark ignition system with a small copper cap filled with a shock-sensitive chemical compound. When the hammer struck the cap, it exploded and ignited the main powder charge. The percussion cap was more reliable than the flintlock in wet weather. It was faster to load, it misfired far less often, and it set the stage for the development of the self-contained metallic cartridge that would eventually make the modern pistol possible. Fact number 8. Samuel Colt did not invent the revolver, but he made it famous. The idea of a firearm with a revolving cylinder holding multiple shots predated Colt by decades, but Samuel Colt, a young American inventor and entrepreneur, patented his design in 1836 and spent years promoting and refining it until it became the dominant repeating pistol design of the 19th century. Colt's genius was as much commercial as mechanical. He understood that a superior product needed superior marketing. He gave demonstrations, he lobbied government officials, he built factories that could produce pistols consistently and at scale. He turned the revolver from a curiosity into an American icon. Fact number 9. The Colt single-action army became known as the gun that won the West. Adopted by the United States Army in 1873, the Colt single-action army, also called the Peacemaker, became one of the most iconic firearms in American history. It was carried by cavalry soldiers, lawmen, outlaws, and cowboys across the American frontier during the latter half of the 19th century. Its silhouette became so associated with that era that even people who have never held a firearm in their lives would recognize it immediately. The long barrel, the curved grip, the simple, elegant lines of a design that was already close to perfect when it first appeared and has barely changed since. Fact number 10. The self-contained metallic cartridge was the invention that made modern pistols possible. Before the metallic cartridge, loading a pistol required multiple separate steps. Powder, wad, ball, priming, each one added time and complexity. The metallic cartridge combined all of those elements into a single unit, a brass case containing primer, powder, and bullet all in one. You pushed it into the chamber, closed the action, and the pistol was ready to fire. Simple, fast, reliable. The metallic cartridge arrived in the mid-19th century, and within a generation had replaced almost every other loading system in existence. It is still the foundation of almost every firearm in the world today. Fact number 11. A revolver works by rotating a cylinder of chambers into alignment with the barrel. Each chamber in the cylinder holds one cartridge. When the hammer is cocked or the trigger is pulled, the cylinder rotates to bring the next loaded chamber into alignment with the barrel. The firing pin strikes the primer, the cartridge fires, and the cylinder advances again. It is a beautifully simple mechanical system. Reliable, easy to understand, easy to maintain, and still in production and in use more than a century and a half after its basic design was established. Fact number 12. The first double-action revolver allowed firing without manually cocking the hammer. Early revolvers required the shooter to manually pull the hammer back with the thumb before each shot, a motion called cocking. This was called single action.
The double-action revolver, developed in the mid-19th century, allowed the trigger pull itself to both cock and release the hammer in a single motion. Double action was slower and required a heavier trigger pull, but it was faster in a real emergency. You could draw and fire without the extra step of cocking. For people who might need to use a pistol quickly and under pressure, that difference mattered enormously.
Fact number 13. The Smith & Wesson Model 1 was the first commercially successful revolver using metallic cartridges. Introduced in 1857, the Smith & Wesson Model 1 chambered a small rimfire cartridge and could hold 7 rounds in its cylinder. It was small, light, and reliable enough to be carried as an everyday sidearm by civilians and off-duty soldiers. During the American Civil War, Union soldiers purchased Smith & Wesson revolvers with their own money to supplement or replace their issued firearms. The demand was so great that the company could not keep up with orders for years.
Fact number 14. Wild Bill Hickok carried a pair of Colt 1851 Navy revolvers. James Butler Hickok, known as Wild Bill, was one of the most famous gunfighters of the American frontier era. He preferred to carry his revolvers butt forward in a sash, rather than in traditional holsters, a style that allowed for a particular cross-draw technique.
Hickok was reportedly an exceptional shot and was involved in numerous gunfights throughout his life. He was killed in 1876 while playing poker in Deadwood, South Dakota, shot from behind by a man named Jack McCall. He was holding a hand of cards that has been known ever since as the dead man's hand.
Fact number 15. The Colt Python is widely considered one of the finest revolvers ever made. Introduced in 1955, the Colt Python was a double-action revolver chambered in .357 Magnum and built to tolerances far tighter than most production firearms of its era. Its action was smooth. Its accuracy was exceptional. Its finish was beautiful. Gun writers and collectors have spent decades arguing about whether any production revolver has ever surpassed it. Most conclude that none has. The Python was discontinued, brought back, discontinued again, and brought back again, because demand never truly went away. Some designs simply refuse to become obsolete.
Fact number 16. The .357 Magnum cartridge was developed specifically to defeat early bulletproof vests. In the 1930s, law enforcement agencies in the United States were encountering criminals who wore early body armor made of steel plates sewn into clothing. Standard pistol cartridges of the era were not reliably capable of penetrating this protection. The .357 Magnum was developed as a collaboration between firearms designer Elmer Keith, ammunition manufacturer Winchester, and Smith & Wesson. It was essentially an elongated and heavily loaded version of the .38 Special cartridge. When it was introduced in 1935, it was the most powerful production handgun cartridge in the world.
Fact number 17. The double-action only revolver has no exposed hammer to snag on clothing. Some revolvers are made with the hammer fully enclosed within the frame, or with a bobbed hammer that cannot be manually cocked. These designs, called double-action only, sacrifice the precision of a cocked single-action shot in exchange for a smoother, snag-free draw from a pocket or concealment holster.
For people who carry a revolver primarily for personal protection and might need to draw quickly from a pocket, the double-action-only configuration is often preferred. The gun is always in the same ready condition. There are no modes to think about. You draw and you pull the trigger.
Fact number 18. Some revolvers can fire more than 6 rounds. The 6-shot revolver is so standard that the numbers become part of the cultural image of the weapon. But revolvers with 5-round cylinders have always existed for compact models, and revolvers with 7, 8, or even 10-round cylinders have been produced for larger frame guns chambered in smaller cartridges. Smith & Wesson has produced 8-shot revolvers in .357 Magnum and 9-shot revolvers in smaller calibers. The number of rounds a cylinder can hold depends on the diameter of the cartridge and the diameter of the cylinder, and engineers have pushed those limits further than most people realize. Fact number 19. The revolver is still in production,
and still widely used today. Despite being more than a century and a half old in its basic design, the revolver has never disappeared. It remains popular with collectors, with hunters, with people who carry firearms for personal protection, and with competitive shooters who prefer its trigger characteristics. Its simplicity is its enduring advantage. There is no magazine to load and seat, no slide to rack, no safety to disengage. You load it, you close the cylinder, it is ready. For people who want a firearm they can pick up after months and trust completely, the revolver's reliability is unmatched. Fact number 20. Dirty Harry's Smith & Wesson Model 29 made the .44 Magnum famous. In the 1971 film Dirty Harry, Clint Eastwood's character carries a Smith & Wesson Model 29 revolver chambered in .44 Magnum, delivering what became one of the most famous lines in cinema history while pointing it at a wounded bank robber. The film caused such demand for the Model 29 that Smith & Wesson could not produce them fast enough. Prices on the used market spiked immediately. The .44 Magnum, which had existed since 1955, became overnight the cartridge that everyone had heard of. Hollywood gave it a fame that decades of sporting use had not quite managed to produce. Fact number 21. A semi-automatic pistol fires 1 round per trigger pull and reloads itself automatically. When a semi-automatic pistol fires, the energy of the cartridge is used to cycle the action. The spent case is ejected, the slide or bolt moves back under spring tension, and a fresh cartridge is stripped from the magazine and loaded into the chamber. All of this happens in a fraction of a second. The shooter simply releases and pulls the trigger again to fire the next round. No manual cocking, no cylinder rotation, just trigger pull after trigger pull until the magazine is empty. Fact number 22. George Luger designed the Luger pistol in 1898. The Luger, formerly known as the Pistole Parabellum, was one of the most recognizable firearms in history. Its distinctive toggle lock action and unusual grip angle set it apart from every other pistol of its era. The Luger was adopted by the German military and used through both World War I and World War II. Allied soldiers prized captured Lugers as souvenirs above almost any other war trophy. The pistol's unusual beauty, its precise engineering, and its association with both German military power and its eventual defeat made it an object of fascination that persists to this day. Fact number 23. John Moses Browning is considered the greatest firearm designer in history. Born in Ogden, Utah in 1855, John Moses Browning designed more successful and influential firearms than any other person who has ever lived. His designs include the Colt 1911 pistol, the Browning High Power, the Winchester Model 1894 rifle, the M2 heavy machine gun, and dozens of other weapons that shaped military history. Browning held 128 gun patents. He worked simultaneously for Colt, Winchester, Remington, and Fabrique Nationale in Belgium. He designed firearms the way some people compose music, with an almost effortless fluency that produced one masterpiece after another until his death in 1926. Fact number 24. The Colt 1911 has been in continuous production for over 100 years. Designed by John Browning and adopted by the United States military in 1911, the 1911 pistol served as the standard sidearm of the American Armed Forces for 75 years, through 2 world wars, Korea, and Vietnam. It was officially replaced in 1985, and it has been in continuous production and continuous use every single day since then. Numerous police departments, military units, and competitive shooters still carry and prefer it. Custom 1911 pistols can cost tens of thousands of dollars. The design is so fundamentally right that more than a century of refinement has produced nothing that everyone agrees is better. Fact number 25. The 1911 introduced the concept of a grip safety. A grip safety is a passive safety mechanism built into the grip of the pistol.
it must be depressed by the shooter's hand when gripping the firearm normally for the gun to fire. If the pistol is dropped or handled improperly, the grip safety prevents the trigger from functioning. Browning included the grip safety in the 1911 at the request of the U.S. Army, which wanted additional protection against accidental discharge. It became one of the defining features of the design, a piece of engineering so well integrated that it feels completely natural in the hand without ever requiring conscious thought. Fact number 26. The Browning High Power was the last pistol John Browning designed before his death. Browning began work on the High Power in the early 1920s in response to a French military requirement for a pistol holding more than 8 rounds. He died in 1926 before completing the design. Belgian engineer Dieudonne Sive finished it, and the pistol was adopted by the Belgian military in 1935. The High Power was used by both Allied and Axis forces during World War II, the only pistol with that distinction. It remained in production until 2018, 83 years after its introduction. It was recently brought back into production due to persistent demand. Some designs simply will not stay retired. Fact number 27. The Walther PPK was the pistol of James Bond. Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, was advised by a firearms expert that Bond's original weapon, a Beretta, was not in keeping with the character. Fleming switched Bond to the Walther PPK beginning with the novel Dr. No in 1958. The PPK, which stands for Polizei Pistoli Kriminal, was introduced in 1931 as a compact pistol for plainclothes police officers. It was small enough to be concealed easily, reliable enough to be trusted, and elegant enough to look correct in the hands of a fictional secret agent. The association with James Bond gave the PPK a cultural profile far beyond what its modest size and caliber would otherwise have warranted. It remains in production today and is still immediately recognizable to people who have never held a firearm. Fact number 28. The Glock pistol was designed by a man who had never designed a gun before. Gaston Glock was an Austrian engineer who made curtain rods and field knives when the Austrian military announced in 1980 that it was looking for a new service pistol. Glock assembled a team of experts, studied the requirements carefully, and submitted a design that had never been done before. The Glock used a polymer frame instead of metal, dramatically reducing weight. It had no manual safety, relying instead on 3 automatic internal safeties. It was simpler than almost any competing design, with far fewer parts. The Austrian military adopted it in 1982. American law enforcement agencies began adopting it in the late 1980s. Today, the Glock is the most widely carried pistol by law enforcement agencies in the United States and is used by military and police forces in more than 40 countries. Fact number 29. Polymer frame pistols are now the dominant design in the world. Following the success of the Glock, virtually every major pistol manufacturer introduced polymer frame designs. Smith & Wesson, Sig Sauer, Heckler & Koch, Beretta, Springfield Armory, and dozens of others all developed pistols using the same basic approach that Glock pioneered. Polymer frames are lighter than steel or aluminum. They do not corrode. They can be manufactured to tight tolerances consistently and at lower cost. And decades of use have demonstrated that they are fully as durable as the metal frames they replaced. The revolution Glock started is now simply how pistols are made. Fact number 30. The striker-fired pistol has largely replaced the hammer-fired pistol in modern designs. Traditional semi-automatic pistols used an external or internal hammer to strike the firing pin. Modern pistols increasingly use a striker, a spring-loaded firing pin that is partially compressed by the trigger pull and released when the trigger reaches the end of its travel. Striker-fired pistols tend to have more consistent trigger pulls than hammer-fired designs. They have fewer external parts to snag on clothing, they're simpler to operate, and simpler to maintain. The Glock was the pistol that brought striker-fired design to mainstream acceptance, and the market has followed in its direction ever since. Fact number 31. The pistol that started World War I was a FN Model 1910.
On June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, a 19-year-old named Gavrilo Princip shot Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria and his wife Sophie with a Fabrique Nationale Model 1910 semi-automatic pistol. The assassination triggered a chain of political and military responses that drew the major powers of Europe into a conflict that killed approximately 17 million people and reshaped the entire world. The pistol used in the shooting is preserved in a museum in Vienna. It is a small, ordinary-looking thing, and yet it changed the course of history more than almost any object ever has. Fact number 32. Abraham Lincoln was shot with a single-shot Derringer pistol. On the evening of April 14, 1865, John Wilkes Booth entered the presidential box at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., and shot President Abraham Lincoln with a Philadelphia Derringer, a small single-shot percussion pistol designed to be concealed in a coat pocket. The Derringer fired a single round of .44 caliber lead ball. Lincoln died the following morning. The pistol used in the assassination is preserved at the Ford's Theater National Historic Site. It is tiny, barely larger than a hand, and it ended the life of the president who had just led the nation through its most devastating war. Fact number 33. The Derringer became synonymous with concealed carry in the American West. Henry Derringer, the Philadelphia gunmaker who designed the original percussion pistol that bore a slightly altered version of his name, could not have imagined how completely his small creation would enter American mythology. Derringers were carried as backup weapons by gamblers, by women who needed discreet protection, by gamblers, and by anyone who wanted a firearm that could be hidden in a vest pocket or a garter. Their small size and single-shot limitation made them impractical for a serious fight, but for a moment of last resort at close range, they were precisely what they were designed to be. Fact number 34. The Mauser C96 was one of the first successful semi-automatic pistols. Introduced in 1896, the Mauser C96, commonly known as the broom handle Mauser for the shape of its grip, was a remarkable engineering achievement for its era. It used a fixed internal magazine loaded from the top with stripper clips and was chambered in a powerful cartridge that gave it an effective range well beyond most pistols of the time. Winston Churchill carried a C96 at the Battle of Omdurman in 1898 and credited it with saving his life. The pistol was also produced under license in China and Spain and saw service in conflicts around the world through the mid-20th century. Fact number 35. The Luger pistol was considered so desirable that soldiers faked wounds to obtain one. During both World War I and World War II, Allied soldiers placed such high value on captured Luger pistols that accounts exist of soldiers trading significant quantities of other valuables to obtain one. Some accounts suggest soldiers occasionally faked or exaggerated minor wounds to be evacuated to field hospitals where traded Lugers were more readily available. The Luger's value was not purely practical. It was beautiful, precise, a piece of engineering that communicated something about the sophistication of the civilization that had produced it, even to the soldiers fighting against that civilization. Fact number 36. The Soviet Tokarev TT-33 was one of the most widely produced pistols of World War II. Designed by Fyodor Tokarev and adopted by the Soviet military in 1930, the TT-33 was a reliable and powerful semi-automatic pistol that served Soviet forces through World War II and into the Cold War era. The Tokarev was simple to manufacture and simple to maintain, qualities that mattered enormously for a nation that needed to produce firearms by the millions under wartime conditions. It was produced in the Soviet Union, China, Yugoslavia, Poland, and several other countries. Tens of millions were made. Many are still in circulation today. Fact number 37. The Beretta M9 served as the standard U.S. military sidearm for over 30 years of service. In 1985, the United States military replaced the Colt 1911 after 74 years of service with the Beretta 92F,
designated the M9 in military service. The Beretta was a modern double-action semi-automatic pistol with a 15-round magazine capacity, more than double the 1911 7-round magazine.
The M9 served American military personnel through the Gulf War, Somalia, the Balkans, Afghanistan, and Iraq. It was officially replaced by the Sig Sauer P320, designated the M17, in 2017. But the M9 remains in service with numerous units and is still one of the most widely recognized military sidearms in the world. Fact number 38. The Desert Eagle was designed to fire rifle cartridges through a pistol. The Desert Eagle, developed in the 1980s, uses a gas-operated action, more common to rifles than pistols, to handle the pressure of large cartridges, including the .357 Magnum, .44 Magnum, and .50 Action Express. The .50 caliber Desert Eagle is one of the most powerful semi-automatic pistols ever produced and is immediately recognizable for its massive size and angular design. It has appeared in hundreds of films and video games, giving it a cultural presence far beyond its practical applications. It is heavy, expensive, and impractical for most purposes. It is also genuinely impressive in a way that has made it one of the most famous pistols ever made. Fact number 39. The Nambu pistol was the standard Japanese military sidearm during World War II. The Type 14 Nambu, named after its designer, General Kajiro Nambu, served as the primary Japanese military pistol during World War II. It was chambered in a relatively small cartridge and had a reputation among Allied soldiers for being less reliable and less powerful than the pistols carried by American and European forces.
Captured Nambus were collected as souvenirs, but were generally considered less desirable than German Lugers or P-38s. They are now collected as historical artifacts, representing the Pacific theater of the war in the same way that Lugers represent the European theater.
Fact number 40. The Sig Sauer P226 is considered one of the finest production pistols ever made. Introduced in the early 1980s, the Sig Sauer P226 narrowly lost the U.S. military contract that went to the Beretta M9, reportedly because of cost rather than performance. The Navy SEALs adopted it anyway, and it became the standard sidearm for one of the most elite military units in the world.
The P226 has been used by law enforcement agencies and military units around the world for more than 4 decades. Its reputation for accuracy, reliability, and durability is nearly unmatched among production pistols. It is the kind of firearm that people who use firearms seriously tend to agree upon when asked what they would trust their life to.
Fact number 41. The caliber of a pistol refers to the diameter of the bullet it fires. Caliber is typically expressed in either inches or millimeters. A 9mm pistol fires a bullet approximately 9 millimeters in diameter, which works out to roughly 11.5 millimeters. The relationship between caliber, velocity, and the mass of the bullet determines the energy of the round and its effect on target. Larger calibers are not always more effective. The relationship between these variables is complex and has been debated by shooters and ballistics researchers for well over a century. Fact number 42. The 9mm Luger is the most widely used pistol cartridge in the world. Developed by George Luger in 1902, the 9mm Parabellum, also known as the 9mm Luger or simply the 9mm, is chambered in more pistols than any other cartridge in the world. It is used by military forces in more than 70 countries and by police departments on every inhabited continent. Its dominance comes from a combination of manageable recoil, reasonable stopping power, high magazine capacity in modern pistols, and decades of manufacturing infrastructure built around it. Billions of rounds of 9mm ammunition are produced every year. It is the closest thing to a universal pistol cartridge that exists. Fact number 43. Pistol magazines can hold a surprising number of rounds. Standard capacity magazines for common service pistols typically hold between 15 and 17 rounds of 9mm ammunition. Some extended magazines hold 30 or more. The Glock 18,
a select fire variant of the Glock 17, can be used with a 33-round magazine. The development of double-stack magazines, where cartridges are staggered in 2 columns rather than 1, allowed pistol designers to dramatically increase ammunition capacity without proportionally increasing the size of the grip. The modern service pistol carries more ammunition than most pistols of even 50 years ago.
Fact number 44. The recoil of a pistol is caused by Newton's third law of motion. When a cartridge fires, the expanding gas propels the bullet forward. The equal and opposite reaction pushes the pistol backward into the shooter's hand. And this rearward movement is called recoil. Pistol designers spend considerable effort managing recoil. The angle of the grip relative to the barrel, the weight of the slide, the strength of the recoil spring, the position of the bore axis relative to the hand, all of these factors influence how the pistol moves when fired and how quickly a follow-up shot can be delivered accurately. Fact number 45. Some pistols can fire in fully automatic mode. Most pistols are semi-automatic, firing 1 round per trigger pull, but some designs, including the Glock 18, the Beretta 93R, and the Stechkin automatic pistol, can fire in fully automatic mode, continuing to fire as long as the trigger is depressed and ammunition remains.
Fully automatic pistols are extremely difficult to control. The muzzle rises rapidly with each shot, and the combination of high rate of fire and small size makes accurate automatic fire nearly impossible without training and practice. They exist as engineering achievements and as military and police tools for specific situations, but they have never been practical for general use.
Fact number 46. The barrel of a pistol is rifled with spiral grooves. The inside of a pistol barrel is not smooth. It contains spiral grooves cut into the metal, a feature called rifling. As the bullet travels down the barrel, these grooves cause it to spin. A spinning bullet is gyroscopically stabilized, meaning it maintains its orientation in flight far more reliably than an unspinning bullet would. Rifling was developed for muskets in the 15th and 16th centuries and has been the standard for all precision firearms ever since. The rate of twist, how quickly the rifling completes 1 full rotation, is carefully calculated based on the weight and length of the bullet to produce optimal stability. Fact number 47. The trigger pull weight of a pistol affects its accuracy significantly. A light trigger requires very little force to fire. A heavy trigger requires more. Light triggers allow the shooter to fire without disturbing the aim of the pistol, producing more accurate shots, but they also increase the risk of an unintentional discharge. Heavy triggers are safer in conditions where the pistol might be handled quickly and under stress, but they require more practice to use accurately because pulling hard against a heavy trigger tends to move the muzzle off target. The debate between light triggers for accuracy and heavy triggers for safety has no universal answer. Different contexts produce different correct answers. A competition shooter and a police officer carry very different priorities. Fact number 48. A pistol's sight radius affects its accuracy. The sight radius is the distance between the front sight and the rear sight of a pistol. A longer sight radius means that any small error in sight alignment produces a smaller angular deviation, and therefore a smaller miss at distance. This is one reason why longer-barreled pistols tend to be more accurate than shorter ones with identical sights. It is also why competitive shooters often prefer pistols with longer barrels and extended sight radii, and why compact carry pistols are considered adequate for close range, but not ideal for precision at distance. Fact number 49. The firing pin strikes the primer to initiate the firing sequence. The primer is a small cup of shock-sensitive chemical compound seated in the base of the cartridge. When the firing pin or striker strikes the primer with sufficient force, it creates a small explosion that sends a jet of hot gas and particles into the main powder charge. The main powder charge then ignites and burns extremely rapidly, producing a large volume of high-pressure gas that propels the bullet down the barrel and out of the muzzle. The entire sequence, from primer strike to bullet leaving the barrel,
takes only a few milliseconds, so fast that it is completely invisible to the human eye.
Fact number 50. Pistols require regular maintenance to function reliably. Carbon buildup from fired cartridges accumulates in the barrel, the action, and around the breech face. This buildup can cause malfunctions if allowed to accumulate excessively. Lubricants dry out over time and must be refreshed. Springs weaken with use and must eventually be replaced. A pistol that is cleaned and maintained regularly will function reliably for tens of thousands of rounds. A pistol that is neglected will begin to malfunction in ways that are unpredictable and potentially dangerous. The relationship between the shooter and the firearm is partly a relationship of ongoing maintenance. The tool works well when it is cared for.
Fact number 51. Every major military in the world issues pistols to at least some of its personnel. The pistol's role in modern military use has diminished significantly from its historical importance. Rifles, machine guns, and other weapons have taken on the primary combat role. But pistols remain standard issue for officers, vehicle crews, pilots, and soldiers whose primary role does not involve direct infantry combat.
The pistol is carried not as a primary fighting tool in most modern military contexts, but as a last resort, a backup for situations where the primary weapon is unavailable, empty, or unusable. Its continued issuance reflects the persistent human desire for a weapon that can always be with you. Fact number 52. The Austrian army was the first major military to adopt a polymer frame pistol. When Austria adopted the Glock 17 in 1982, it became the first major military force in the world to issue a pistol with a polymer frame as standard equipment. Military procurement officials in other countries were skeptical. A plastic gun seemed wrong to people accustomed to steel and aluminum. Within a decade, those same militaries were adopting their own polymer-framed pistols. The Austrian decision, which seemed unconventional at the time, turned out to be simply early. The rest of the world eventually followed the same direction. Fact number 53. The Swiss SIG P210 is considered one of the most accurate production pistols ever made. Adopted by the Swiss military in 1949, the SIG P210 was manufactured to tolerances so tight that it regularly produced groups at 25 meters that other production pistols could not approach. Its action was smoother than almost anything else available. Its fit and finish were exceptional by any standard. The P210 was expensive, extremely expensive. Its precision came at a cost that most military procurement offices were unwilling to pay for a sidearm. But for shooters who cared about accuracy above all other considerations, it set a standard that few production pistols have approached. Fact number 54. The Makarov pistol was the standard Soviet sidearm for decades. Adopted by the Soviet military in 1951, the Makarov pistol, designed by Nikolai Makarov, became one of the most widely produced pistols of the Cold War era. It was simple, reliable, and easy to manufacture. It was issued to Soviet and Warsaw Pact military and police forces for over 40 years. The Makarov used a straight blowback action, making it mechanically simpler than most competing designs. Millions were produced, and large numbers entered the civilian market after the collapse of the Soviet Union. They are still in use by military and police forces in several countries today. Fact number 55. The Israeli Jericho 941 was specifically designed for desert conditions. Developed in Israel in the late 1980s, the Jericho 941 was designed with the harsh environmental conditions of the Middle East specifically in mind. Its tolerances were set to allow reliable function even when dusty, sandy, or exposed to extreme heat. Israel's unique security environment has produced a distinct culture of firearms design and carry. Israeli armed forces and security personnel have extensive experience with pistols in real-world conditions, and Israeli-designed firearms reflect that experience in ways that influence global pistol design. Fact number 56. The Chinese military uses a locally designed pistol based on a Soviet design. China's standard military sidearm, the QSZ-92, is a domestically designed pistol that shows influence from the Soviet Makarov and from Western designs. It is chambered in a unique Chinese cartridge and represents China's effort to develop an indigenous firearms industry rather than rely on foreign designs. China produces firearms for export as well as domestic use, and Chinese-manufactured pistols have found their way into military and police service in numerous countries, particularly in Africa and parts of Asia where cost is a primary consideration. Fact number 57. The Brazilian Taurus Company has become one of the largest pistol manufacturers in the world. Founded in 1939 in Porto Alegre, Brazil, Taurus began as a tool and die company before moving into firearms production. It initially produced pistols under license from Beretta before developing its own designs. Taurus pistols are known for offering features comparable to more expensive competitors at significantly lower prices. They have been controversial, with some models receiving criticism for reliability and quality control, while others have earned strong reputations for value. The company now sells millions of pistols annually across dozens of countries and has become one of the most recognized names in the global firearms market. Fact number 58. Germany's Heckler & Koch is considered one of the finest pistol manufacturers in the world. Founded in 1949 in Oberndorf am Neckar, Heckler & Koch began production under occupation authority permission to manufacture sewing machines and other consumer goods before transitioning to firearms. The company became known for engineering quality and innovation that consistently set standards for the industry. The HK-USP, the P30, the VP9, and the P7 are among the designs that have earned the company its reputation. HK pistols are known for their exceptional build quality, their innovative features, and their price, which reflects the engineering investment behind them. Military and law enforcement agencies around the world have adopted HK pistols precisely because they are trusted to work when nothing else is acceptable. Fact number 59. The Finnish Lofty L35 was designed specifically to function in extreme cold. Finland's location in the far north created specific requirements for its military firearms. Standard lubricants thicken in extreme cold, causing actions to slow or stop functioning entirely. The Lofty L35, designed by Imo Lofty and adopted in 1935, incorporated an accelerator mechanism that helped ensure reliable cycling even in temperatures far below freezing. The Lottie saw service through the Winter War against the Soviet Union and the continuation war that followed. Finnish soldiers fighting in conditions of extreme cold depended on firearms that would function when temperatures dropped to levels that disabled other weapons. The Lottie was designed with that specific demand as its primary engineering challenge. Fact number 60. The Philippine military developed its own pistol after independence. The Philippines has a long history with the 1911 pistol, which was introduced during the American colonial period and became deeply embedded in Filipino military and police culture. After independence, the Philippine government established domestic firearms manufacturing capabilities, and several locally produced variants and designs emerged over the following decades. The 1911 remains deeply popular in the Philippines to this day, both in military and civilian use. Philippine gunsmiths have developed a reputation for producing high-quality custom 1911 pistols that are sought by collectors and competitors around the world. The design that John Browning created in America found a particularly devoted following in the islands of the Western Pacific.
Fact number 61. Pistols were primary weapons for cavalry soldiers for centuries. Before the rifle made cavalry charges obsolete, mounted soldiers carried pistols as their primary short-range weapon. A horseman could carry 2 or 4 pistols loaded and ready, fire them in rapid succession during a charge, and then resort to the sword for close combat. The wheel-lock pistol was specifically valuable for cavalry because it could be loaded in advance and carried safely until needed. The single-shot limitation of early pistols meant that a cavalry soldier's initial volley was his only long-range option. After that, the fight became hand-to-hand.
Fact number 62. Officers in World War I carried pistols as symbols of rank as much as weapons. The trenches of World War I were not well suited to the rifle. Its length made it awkward in confined spaces. Officers leading charges across no man's land often carried pistols, which were more practical in close quarters and distinguished them visually as commanders. The pistol became associated with leadership in a way that persisted through the war and influenced how officers were equipped in subsequent conflicts. The symbolism was real. A pistol said something about who was giving the orders and who was following them. Fact number 63. The German P-38 was introduced to replace the Luger during World War II. By the late 1930s, the German military recognized that the Luger, despite its iconic status, was too expensive and too difficult to manufacture at the scale that a major war would require. The Walther P-38 was designed as a replacement that could be produced more quickly and at lower cost without sacrificing reliability. The P-38 introduced a double-action trigger to German military service, allowing the pistol to be carried with a round in the chamber and the hammer down, then fired immediately by pulling the trigger. This was a genuine safety and operational improvement over the single-action Luger. The P-38 served German forces through the remainder of the war and continued in production for decades afterward. Fact number 64. American soldiers in World War II often preferred captured German pistols to their issued M1911. This was not a universal preference, and the 1911 had devoted admirers throughout the war. But captured Lugers and P-38s were prized, traded, and carried by American soldiers who encountered them. The reasons were partly practical. The German pistols were well made and reliable, and partly the same collecting instinct that has always made war trophies valuable. The variety of pistols carried by American soldiers in World War II reflected the informal trade in captured weapons that occurred throughout the conflict. A soldier's personal collection of firearms might include his issued weapon, a captured enemy pistol, and anything else that had come his way through the particular circumstances of his service. Fact number 65. The Korean War saw significant use of the 1911 in close quarters fighting. The mountainous terrain of Korea created fighting conditions where close-range encounters were common, and the rifle was sometimes less useful than a compact pistol. American soldiers and Marines who found themselves in close quarters with enemy forces often relied on their 1911 pistols when their rifles were empty or impractical. After-action reports from Korea contributed to the ongoing discussion within the military about the appropriate role of the pistol as a backup weapon versus a primary one in certain contexts. The 1911's reliability under harsh conditions and its stopping power in close-range encounters reinforced its status among the soldiers who used it. Fact number 66. Vietnam War soldiers sometimes preferred the .38 special revolver to their issued pistol. American military personnel in Vietnam were officially issued the 1911, but some, particularly pilots and special operations forces, preferred to carry Smith & Wesson revolvers in .38 Special or .357 Magnum. The revolver's perceived reliability, the idea that it would not jam in wet or dirty conditions, made it attractive in the humid jungle environment. Pilots who might face the possibility of capture and escape preferred a pistol they trusted completely. The revolver's simplicity, no magazine to lose, no slide to rack, made it the choice for people who wanted a backup weapon that would work without thought under conditions of extreme stress. Fact number 67. Special operations forces typically carry more powerful pistols than conventional forces. Standard military pistols are chosen for a balance of size, weight, ammunition capacity, and reliability across a wide range of conditions and users. Special operations units, whose personnel are more thoroughly trained and who face more varied and demanding situations, often carry pistols optimized for specific requirements. The HK-45, the Sig Sauer P226, the Glock 19, and various 1911 variants have all seen service with special operations units that selected them based on their specific operational requirements rather than the logistics considerations that drive standard military procurement. The best tool for the most demanding users is not always the same tool that is most practical for everyone else. Fact number 68.
The pistol duel was a formal institution in European and American culture for centuries. From the 17th through the 19th century, disputes of honor between gentlemen were sometimes settled through formal pistol duels, governed by strict codes of conduct. The Code Duello specified everything from the conditions that justified a challenge to the distance between participants, the number of shots permitted, and the roles of seconds and surgeons. Dueling pistols were made in matched pairs, carefully balanced, smoothbore for fairness, since rifling would give an advantage to a more skilled marksman, and finished to the highest standard their owners could afford. They were works of art as much as weapons, objects that communicated something about the social standing and values of the men who owned them.
Fact number 69. Alexander Hamilton was killed in a pistol duel with Aaron Burr in 1804. Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury of the United States, was killed on July 11, 1804 in a duel with Aaron Burr, the sitting Vice President of the United States. The duel took place at Weehawken, New Jersey, across the Hudson River from New York City. The pistols used were a pair of Wogden dueling pistols belonging to Hamilton's brother-in-law. Hamilton fired first, reportedly deliberately missing. Burr fired and mortally wounded Hamilton, who died the following day. The death effectively ended Burr's political career. The duel remains one of the most famous and consequential in American history.
The gunfight has been depicted in films and television programs more times than almost any other event in American history. The reality? A brief, chaotic exchange in a narrow lot between men who were mostly afraid differs considerably from the mythologized version. But the mythology endures because it captures something people want to believe about a particular moment in American history.
Fact number 70. The OK Corral gunfight lasted approximately 30 seconds. The gunfight at the OK Corral, which took place in Tombstone, Arizona on October 26, 1881, lasted approximately 30 seconds and involved perhaps 30 shots fired. 3 men were killed, 3 were wounded. It involved Wyatt Earp, his brothers Virgil and Morgan, and Doc Holliday on one side, and members of the Clanton and McLaury families on the other.
Fact number 71. Antique firearms can be bought and sold without the regulations that apply to modern ones. In the United States, firearms manufactured before 1899 are classified as antiques and are generally not subject to the federal regulations that govern modern firearms. They can be bought and sold without background checks, shipped through the mail, and owned without the paperwork that accompanies modern transactions.
This classification has created a significant market for antique pistols, both genuine historical pieces and reproductions made to antique specifications. A Colt single-action army manufactured in 1878 occupies a different legal category than one manufactured in 2024, even if the two are mechanically identical. Fact number 72. Colt serial number 1 is one of the most valuable firearms ever sold. The very first Colt single-action army produced, bearing serial number 1, has passed through several collections and commands a value that reflects both its historical significance and its status as the beginning of one of the most iconic firearm lines in history. Firearms with historical provenance, those that can be documented as having belonged to historical figures or been present at significant events, command prices that reflect their status as historical artifacts as much as functional objects. A pistol carried by a famous person is worth far more than an identical pistol that was not. Fact number 73. Custom pistol smiths can spend hundreds of hours on a single firearm. At the highest level of the custom pistol market, individual gunsmiths spend weeks or months fitting, polishing, timing, and tuning a single pistol to a level of performance and finish that production firearms cannot approach. Every surface is hand-fitted. Every component is individually matched to every other component. The trigger is adjusted to a weight and feel that no factory pistol can replicate. These custom firearms can cost tens of thousands of dollars. Their owners are not primarily buying a tool. They are buying the accumulated skill of a craftsman who has spent decades learning to do something at a level of excellence that is genuinely rare.
Fact number 74. Competitive shooting sports have driven significant pistol development. The practical shooting sports, including IPSC, USPSA, and IDPA, involve shooting courses of fire that require accurate hits on multiple targets while moving, reloading, and managing time pressure. Competitive shooters have developed techniques, equipment modifications, and training methods that have influenced how pistols are designed for all users. The demand from competitive shooters for better triggers, better sights, improved ergonomics, and higher capacity has pushed manufacturers to improve their production pistols in ways that benefit everyone who uses them. Competition is a laboratory for pistol development, and the lessons learned there eventually reach the broader market. Fact number 75. The holster is as important as the pistol for practical carry. A pistol that cannot be drawn quickly and reliably when needed provides less protection than its presence would suggest. The holster that carries it must hold it securely enough that it will not fall out under movement, position it correctly for the shooter's draw stroke, protect the trigger from accidental contact, and allow a clean, repeatable draw under stress. The holster industry has developed alongside the pistol industry, producing designs that address all of these requirements in configurations for different carry positions, different clothing, and different applications. A serious shooter typically owns several holsters and is considered the question of carry position as carefully as the question of which pistol to carry. Fact number 76. Some historical pistols are valued primarily as works of art. European royal armories and the workshops that supplied them produced pistols of extraordinary artistic quality during the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. Handles inlaid with gold and silver wire, arrows engraved with hunting scenes, locks decorated with figures from mythology, stocks of carved ivory or exotic wood. These pistols were not primarily tools. They were statements of wealth, power, and taste, made by craftsmen working at the absolute limit of their abilities. They are preserved in museums around the world, not because of what they could do, but because of what they represent about the civilization that made them. Fact number 77. The Blue Book of Gun Values is published annually to help collectors assess prices. The used firearms market is influenced by condition, rarity, historical significance, and current demand in ways that make pricing complex. The Blue Book of Gun Values, published annually since 1981, provides pricing guidance for thousands of firearms based on condition grades ranging from perfect to poor. Collectors and dealers use it as a starting reference, understanding that the actual price a specific firearm will bring depends on factors the book can only approximate. A firearm in exceptional original condition with its original box and paperwork will command a premium over the book value that reflects the market's appreciation for original, unaltered examples. Fact number 78. Factory-engraved Colts from the 19th century are among the most collected American firearms. Colt offered engraving as a factory option on many of its firearms throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. Factory-engraved examples, documented as having left the factory in engraved condition, command significant premiums over unadorned examples of the same model. The most elaborate factory-engraved Colts, produced by master engravers employed by the factory, are considered major pieces of American decorative arts as much as firearms. They appear at major auction houses and in museum collections. The craft of firearm engraving, nearly a lost art in its most elaborate form, is preserved largely through these historical examples. Fact number 79. Reproduction historical pistols allow shooters to experience historical firearms safely. The black powder reproduction market produces faithful copies of historical flintlock, percussion, and early cartridge pistols that allow shooters to experience the mechanics and handling of historical firearms using modern materials and quality control. Shooting a reproduction flintlock pistol with black powder and cast lead balls gives a direct experience of the limitations and characteristics that shaped historical combat in a way that no book or museum exhibit can replicate. The slow reload, the sensitivity to weather, the cloud of smoke,
the particular feel of an action designed in a different era for a different world. Fact number 80. Some pistols have been continuously in production for over a century. The Colt single-action Army has been in more or less continuous production since 1873. The 1911 has been in continuous production since 1911. The Browning High Power was in production from 1935 to 2018 and has since been reintroduced. These designs have outlasted the companies that first produced them in their original form, outlasted the military conflicts they were created for, and outlasted the conventional wisdom about what a pistol should be. Their survival is evidence, not just of their quality, but of the particular way they fit something in the human relationship with functional objects. Some things are simply right, in a way that time does not diminish. Fact number 81. The 4 fundamental rules of firearm safety have prevented countless accidents. The 4 rules: treat every firearm as if it is loaded, never point it at anything you are not willing to destroy, keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on target, and know your target and what is beyond it, were developed through the accumulated wisdom of firearms instructors over many decades. Following all 4 rules simultaneously makes an accidental discharge that causes harm essentially impossible. A person who follows all 4 rules cannot point a loaded firearm at someone unintentionally, cannot fire without intending to, and cannot hit something they did not mean to hit. The rules are simple. Their consistent application is everything. Fact number 82. Most accidental discharges involve a finger on the trigger. Analysis of accidental discharge incidents consistently finds that the majority involve a finger contacting the trigger when it should not. This can happen during a startle response, during a fall, during holstering, or during any situation where attention is divided and muscle memory overrides conscious thought. The solution is the habit, built through thousands of repetitions of correct practice, of keeping the trigger finger extended along the frame of the pistol until the sights are on an intended target. A habit so deeply ingrained that it persists even under stress. Building that habit is one of the first and most important tasks in firearms training. Fact number 83. Modern pistols have multiple internal safeties that prevent firing from drops. A drop safety is a mechanism that prevents the firing pin or striker from moving forward unless the trigger is deliberately pulled. Most modern pistols have at least 1 and often 2 or 3 such mechanisms. A modern quality pistol dropped from a reasonable height onto a hard surface will not fire. The internal safeties are designed specifically to prevent this. But the design assumption is always that the firearm will be handled with the same care as any other potentially dangerous tool. The safety mechanisms reduce the consequences of accidents. They do not eliminate the responsibility to handle the firearm carefully. Fact number 84. Dry fire practice is one of the most effective ways to improve pistol skills. Dry fire practice, practicing the draw, aim, and trigger press without live ammunition, allows a shooter to repeat fundamental motions thousands of times without the cost of ammunition or the need for a shooting range. The snap cap, a dummy cartridge that protects the firing pin from the impact of dry fire, allows the complete cycle of the action to be practiced safely indoors. Professional competition shooters and law enforcement trainers consistently cite dry fire as one of the highest value training activities available. The fundamentals of marksmanship are built through repetition, and dry fire allows repetition without limits. Fact number 85. Cleaning a pistol requires disassembling it into its major components. Most modern semi-automatic pistols are designed to be field stripped, disassembled into 4 or 5 major components, without tools. The barrel, slide, recoil spring, and frame separate easily, allowing the shooter to clean the bore, the action, and the frame interior. Knowing how to disassemble, clean, lubricate, and reassemble a pistol is a fundamental skill for anyone who owns one. A clean, properly lubricated pistol functions reliably. A dirty, dry pistol begins to malfunction in ways that accumulate gradually until something fails at a moment when failure is most costly.
Fact number 86. Ammunition selection matters as much as pistol selection for practical purposes. The same pistol will perform differently with different ammunition. Modern defensive ammunition, designed to expand reliably upon impact, is optimized for very different performance than ball ammunition, which does not expand and is typically used for range practice.
Premium defensive ammunition is tested extensively for reliable expansion across a range of conditions and barriers. Law enforcement agencies and defensive shooters invest considerable time and resources in ammunition selection because the choice of ammunition affects the real-world performance of the pistol as much as the choice of pistol itself. Fact number 87. Training under stress is fundamentally different from training in calm conditions. A shooter who performs well on a calm range may perform significantly differently under conditions of time pressure, physical exertion, noise, or emotional stress. The physiological stress response narrows attention, reduces fine motor control, and can override conscious decisions in favor of whatever patterns are most deeply ingrained. This is why training that incorporates some form of stress, time limits, physical activity before shooting, competition, or force-on-force scenarios produces more reliable performance in real-world conditions than calm, deliberate range practice alone. The brain needs to have practiced the skill under conditions that resemble the conditions in which it will need to perform. Fact number 88. The holster draw is one of the most trained and refined skills in defensive pistol use. Drawing a pistol from a holster under stress and bringing it to a firing position accurately requires a series of precise motor movements executed in sequence at speed. Every unnecessary motion adds time. Every inconsistency in grip or position reduces accuracy. Professional instructors spend years refining their own draw and teaching others to refine theirs. Competition shooters measure their draw times to fractions of a second and practice the movement hundreds of times per week. The draw is not a single action, but a chain of small actions, each of which must be correct for the whole sequence to produce the result that is needed. Fact number 89. One-handed shooting was once the standard training method. Early pistol training, influenced by the dueling tradition and the image of the gunfighter, emphasized one-handed shooting with the arm extended. This position was considered correct form in military and police training well into the 20th century. Modern training almost universally teaches a two-handed grip, which provides significantly better control of recoil, faster follow-up shots, and greater stability for accurate shooting under stress. The one-handed technique survives in certain competitive shooting disciplines, but is no longer considered optimal for practical defensive use. Fact number 90. The decision to use a pistol in self-defense carries lifelong consequences. This is not a technical fact about pistols, but it is perhaps the most important fact about them. The decision to use a firearm in self-defense, even when legally and morally justified, carries consequences that extend far beyond the immediate moment. Legal proceedings, financial cost, psychological aftermath. The weight of having made an irreversible decision under conditions of extreme stress. Serious instructors and responsible gun owners understand that the firearm is a last resort, maintained and trained with precisely because the situations in which it might be needed are ones where every other option has failed. The pistol is a tool. The judgment of when and whether to use it is a human responsibility that no amount of training or legislation can fully remove from the person holding it. Fact number 91. The pistol has been in continuous development for over 500 years. From the first crude hand cannons of the 15th century to the precision, polymer-framed semi-automatics of today, the pistol has been continuously refined, reimagined, and improved by generations of engineers and craftsmen who each built on what came before them. 500 years of incremental improvement, punctuated by occasional genuine breakthroughs, has produced something that would be completely unrecognizable to the craftsmen who made the first handheld firearms,
but that serves the same fundamental human desire. A weapon that can be carried by one person and used at a moment's notice.
Fact number 92. No pistol design has ever been universally agreed upon as optimal. The 1911 versus Glock debate has occupied firearms forums and gun store conversations for decades. The question of caliber, of action type, of single stack versus double stack magazine, of metal frame versus polymer has no answer that satisfies everyone, because the correct answer depends entirely on what the pistol is for and who is carrying it. This persistent disagreement is evidence not of confusion, but of the genuine complexity of the design problem. A pistol must be small enough to carry, large enough to handle, powerful enough to be useful, gentle enough to be controlled, simple enough to operate under stress, and reliable enough to function in conditions that cannot be predicted in advance. Optimizing for all of those requirements simultaneously produces different answers for different people. Fact number 93. The pistol appears in the flag and coat of arms of several nations and regions. The pistol and other firearms appear in the official symbols of several countries and regions as representations of historical struggle, independence, or the right of the people to bear arms. Mozambique's national flag famously features an AK-47 assault rifle. Various regional and municipal arms include pistols as symbols of defense or historical significance. The inclusion of firearms in official symbols reflects the particular histories of the places that chose them. What a weapon means in a national symbol depends entirely on the story that surrounds it. The same object can represent liberation in one context and oppression in another. Fact number 94. Some of the finest pistols ever made were produced in the 19th century. The combination of skilled hand craftsmanship, high-quality materials, and the absence of the manufacturing shortcuts that mass production sometimes requires produced pistols in the 19th century that have never been surpassed for their particular qualities. A Colt single-action Army from 1880, in original condition, with its hand-fitted parts and its original case-hardened finish, represents a standard of craftsmanship that modern production firearms do not attempt to replicate, because the economics of production make it impossible. The old guns are not inferior to new ones in every way. In some ways, they represent a peak that has not been revisited. Fact number 95. The pistol has inspired more literature, film, and art than almost any other human tool. From the dime novels of the American West to the films of Sam Peckinpah, from the spy thrillers of Ian Fleming to the crime fiction of Raymond Chandler, the pistol appears as a central object in an enormous proportion of the storytelling that the past 2 centuries have produced. It appears because it is a concentrated symbol of power, of danger, of the irreversibility of certain human decisions, and of the particular kind of individual agency that no other tool quite represents. The pistol does not require great strength to use. It does not require great skill to use badly. In stories, as in life, it changes situations in ways that cannot be undone. Fact number 96. Pistol marksmanship was an Olympic sport from 1896 to the present day. Pistol shooting has been part of the Olympic Games since the first modern Olympics in Athens in 1896, making it one of the oldest continuously contested Olympic sports. Events include rapid-fire pistol, 10-meter air pistol, and 25-meter pistol competitions that test precision, consistency, and the ability to perform under competitive pressure. Olympic pistol shooting bears little resemblance to combat shooting or defensive pistol use. It is a precision sport that rewards stillness, breath control, trigger discipline, and the ability to produce identical results repeatedly over a long series of shots. The best Olympic pistol shooters are among the finest precision athletes in the world. Fact number 97. The sound of a pistol shot is distinctive enough that people recognize it immediately. The sharp crack of a pistol firing, the particular combination of the supersonic bullet breaking the sound barrier, and the pressure wave from the muzzle
is a sound that people recognize immediately from any distance and from any direction. It is a sound that carries historical weight, that appears in the same instant as dozens of associations accumulated from films, from news, from history. The sound itself has become part of the cultural vocabulary in a way that reflects how deeply the pistol is embedded in human history and human storytelling.
Fact number 98. The pistol will almost certainly continue to change in the coming decades. Advances in materials science, in manufacturing technology, in electronics and sensing will produce pistols in the coming decades that differ from today's designs in ways that are currently impossible to fully predict. Smart gun technology, which would allow a pistol to fire only when held by its authorized user, has been in development for decades and may eventually reach practical reliability. New materials may produce frames and barrels lighter and stronger than anything available today. The pistol that exists 50 years from now will be the product of the same continuous process of improvement that produced today's pistol from the hand cannon of 5 centuries ago.
Fact number 99. The pistol is carried today by millions of people around the world. Military personnel, police officers, security professionals, and private citizens in dozens of countries carry pistols every day. For most of them, the pistol will never be drawn in a situation that requires firing it. It is carried as insurance against a possibility that most carriers will never face.
The weight of it, the awareness of it, the responsibility it represents is part of the daily experience of millions of people who have made the decision that the burden of carrying it is worth the security it represents. Most of them hope, every day, that they will never need to use it.
Fact number 100. The pistol is ultimately a human invention that reflects everything complicated about being human. It was made to protect and to harm, to defend and to threaten, to enforce law and to break it, to end conflicts and to begin them, to preserve life and to end it. The same object, in different hands in different moments, has served every one of those purposes. Understanding the pistol, its history, its mechanics, its place in human culture, does not require loving it or fearing it. It requires only the recognition that it is one of the things humans have made, shaped by human ingenuity and human need, and that, like most human things, it is neither purely good nor purely bad, but something more complicated than either. It is a tool. And like all tools, what it is depends enormously on who is holding it and why.
And that is 100. 100 quiet facts about one of the most significant objects in human history. Some of them were things you may have known. Some of them may have opened something new. Some of them drifted past while you were already somewhere between waking and sleep. And that is exactly as it should be. You don't need to remember any of it. The brain will do what it does. Keep what connects to something it already knows. Let the rest settle quietly into the background of things you have heard. Thank you for being here. If this was worth your time, a comment or a subscription means more than you know. Good night, sleep well, and I'll see you in the next one.